Right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Please do come and fill in the seats at the table if you like, and we're going to get going straight away because we have a strict time limit, and we want to get through this amazing array of speakers that we have today. So welcome to this Marrakech Partnership Implementation Lab on energy policy, called The Power of Policy to Accelerate the Just Transition Away from Fossil Fuels. To me, the term implementation lab conjures up a kind of image of big glass bottles and tubes and bubbling vats of colored liquids in a kind of Willy Wonka laboratory of magic. I think we all need some of that magic to solve the challenge of climate change. But what Implementation Lab is in reality is a much more interactive roundtable discussion than a classic panel session, really to serve as a space to get into more of a deeper dive into the issues at hand and the challenges and opportunities around policy in this particular thematic area of energy. So my name is Andrew Prague. I'm the Managing Director for Policy at the We Mean Business Coalition. Apologies for my boss, CEO Maria Mendelus, who in the end had to be in another event, so I'll deliver the opening remarks on her behalf. We are a coalition of progressive business organizations working with some of the world's most influential businesses, some of them sat at this table, to try to move the dial and get further action on climate change. We all know in this room that we're at a critical moment in this process for countries to be stepping up and delivering their new national climate plans, the so-called NDCs. We've seen great progress on that already this week with new countries setting up new targets, the UK, with Brazil, and others, but many are still to come. And it's really time to be calling from across society to get stronger action and more ambitious and investable NDCs. We see the urgency getting ever stronger. Just yesterday, we saw new numbers from the Global Carbon Project showing that emissions this year are projected to rise again. That is, CO2 emissions from energy rise by less, but still rising, which is a sobering thought given the urgency of action that we need to do. In that context, we also all know that for most countries, energy is probably the kind of #1 ticket item that has to be addressed within these NDCs, within the policy plans overall. And it's for that reason that energy was very central to the outcomes of the global stocktake, COP28 last year, with renewables, energy efficiency, electric transport, coal-fired power, all featuring specifically in the list of commitments, as well as, of course, the overall strong message on transitioning away from fossil fuels and accelerating action this decade. So it's clear now that we can't consider those specific outcomes as individual measures. Countries can't pick and choose and take just one. They like renewables or they don't like the other one. They really have to be taken together as one package. And the IEA has done analysis on this showing that, for example, if we only take the renewables and efficiency part, we'd only get 2/3 of the way to where we need to be. So we absolutely have to keep the spotlight not only on those clean energy aspects, but also on the question of fossil fuels. At We Mean Business, we've been working to really make sure that we have a business voice supporting all elements of this transition, including the fossil fuel part. And to that end, we built out a campaign called Fossil to Clean, in the run-up to COP28, which really got that business voice speaking up for fossil fuels. Again, some of the key proponents of it sitting here at the table. And we've been building on that this year to turn the spotlight on the NDCs and say, well, what do businesses need from NDCs to make sure that they are investable, that we will get the capital moving from the private sector, and that they will accelerate this transition away from fossil fuels. So it's clear that we need these NDCs to be investment plans overall that bring in the support of all actors across the economy. We need to show that they not only economic sense, but they also bring benefit to society, the jobs, safety, security, well-being to people, and get wider support from society. So that's why today we have this amazing range of speakers from governments, from business, and from civil society to talk through some of these issues in this kind of more interactive format. And the format is, and we'll get to it now. So we have 3 keynote speakers who give a 7-minute intervention about the kind of cutting edge solutions that they see in this area. And then we'll turn to a rapid fire kind of roundtable, 3 minutes each to really get a wide range of perspectives on the table. So with that, a big thank you to the Marrakech Partnership and the Global Climate Action Team for having us organize this session today. It's a great honor to do this. And we'll turn then to the keynote speakers. The first one we have here, because I know he has to leave quite quickly, is Jesper Brodin, who is CEO of the Inca Group, which is the overall owning the retail part of IKEA, a brand that we all know. He's been with IKEA for more than 20 years and since 2017 in the CEO role. And I would say he's absolutely a leading light in the world of business action on climate change. So Jesper, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and do apologize for leaving after this intervention. It's actually Maria who's calling me to the next intervention, so I blame you. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear IKEA customers, a few words from our side. To start with, let's acknowledge that we live in possibly the most important decade for humankind, at least so we believe at IKEA. Among many crises and challenges that we are exposed to, we believe that climate change is at the heart of everything. If we don't resolve that, others will be diminished in the light of the size of the impact of climate change. Unfortunately, we are at the point where climate change is no longer a distant threat, but actually upon us. We see the evidence of it all around the world. Only from an IKEA perspective, during this year alone, we have had 6 major events, climate events in societies where we operate. Weather events in China, in the Arab Emirates. We have seen 2 monster storms in Florida. We had recent, of course, calamities in Spain, and the list continues. So I would like to call out, of course, the evidence of the suffering and the human tragedy, but also the true impact on a business P&L, both on top and bottom line. This is no longer a small issue. It's actually quite a considerable impact. Now, IKEA is committed to the Paris Agreement since the start of it all. Maybe needless to say, that means that we take upon us to deliver scope 1, 2, and 3, a full delivery to the -90% carbon by 2050 and a -50 by 2030. Most of our efforts are naturally geared towards the -50% reduction by 2030. So why do we do that? Well, we see 3 reasons, and each reason is enough on its own to motivate us. We are deeply concerned. The facts we have at the table and the knowledge we have as our generation of leaders means that there is no way, from an ethical point of view, that we would hand over this crisis to the next generation. It's ours to deal with. Secondly, from a brand perspective, both co-workers and our customers expect us to be a leader in this space. At IKEA, we do a survey with about 35,000 people around the world, IKEA customers, biannual. And at the last measure point we had, about 68% of all our customers around the globe call out climate change as their biggest concern. It doesn't vary a lot, like people might think, between China, US, Sweden, and whatnot. The variance comes if you travel down in age groups. If you go down to the 25-somethings, it's up in the 90s. What is interesting to call out, when we ask the same group of people, are you prepared to pay for climate smart? Only 6% of IKEA customers say yes. Now, the wrong conclusion would be to make it would be that people don't care after all. They do. They simply can't afford to pay more for the bunk bed or for the chair or for the pot and the pan and so forth. That is the economic reality for all of us that we need to accept. Now I come to the good news. The third reason for us to address climate and climate transformation is because it's possibly the best business potential we have ever stumped upon. Every time we address every time we address carbon, we address cost in our value chain. For those of you who are interested, we are very happy and inspired to share our carbon footprint from 2016 and the one we have today. What you will see is that in almost all parts of our carbon footprint, from raw material production, transport, retailing, customer use of products, afterlife of products, it's very synonymous to our cost structure within the total value chain. So when we become climate smart, we become cost smart. If you look at the data of all the actions that we have put together in the totality, because of course it's not a silver bullet to shift and to transform, we are actually at plus 31% from a business growth since Paris Agreement, plus 31%. We are at minus 24 on absolute carbon, not relative, absolute carbon, compensating for the growth and then beyond. And that means since the last time of sharing was halfway to 2030, we are basically on the pace to deliver to the Paris Agreement. And when I say we, of course it's IKEA, but it also includes all the corporations, companies, service providers, suppliers across the whole IKEA scope of carbon. So it's not only sharing with us the opportunity of that it actually is possible, but it's also sharing that it is a fantastic business opportunity. And this is one of my key messages that I would like to bring to you and that we would like to proclaim to the rest of the world. In fact, if we in IKEA would be ignoring the transformation into a climate smart economy, one thing will be for sure, we will have massive difficulties to be cost relevant in the future. We will have difficulties to be low price because having 40% of our cost base and our carbon footprint in raw materials and expecting that raw materials in the mid and long term is not going to get at a lower price in the future, we are actually in a hurry to make this climate transition also from a cost perspective. So we're not the only one. We are engaged in different groups and constellations, including the WEF Climate Alliance, where we, with 131 other companies, interesting enough, adding up the carbon footprint from these corporation multinationals, would it be a country, it would be the third biggest in the world, only 131 companies. These companies are plus 18% the last 3 years and minus 10 in carbon. There is an increasing number of companies joining the train towards a climate smart economy. And please note, this has absolutely for us nothing to do with party politics. This is about existentialism and smart business. The distance as we speak is growing between the hesitant ones on the platform and the people who are actually making the risky investments possibly, but also harvesting from being climate smart. Now we need to do better. We need to do much more. We have 5 years to go until we need to be at the minus 50% reduction. We need to increase speed, we need to increase impact, and we need to collaborate to make that happen. I speak for the other 131 CEOs when I say that it will be difficult for us to go all the way unless we not only collaborate in our value chain, but also when it comes to deep collaboration between policymakers, the private and the public sector. Finally, we are here to honor the breakthroughs and the decisions from last COP, when the world agreed to phase out fossil fuel, the sooner the better, where we agreed to triple renewable energy investments and double energy efficiency. At IKEA, we have committed 7.5 billion euro in additional renewable energy. We are at 4.2 billion at this moment invested already, which means IKEA is almost a utility company also selling furniture. We announced yesterday that we have added a commitment to do 1.5 billion euro to energy efficiency in renewable heating and cooling. All of this, as I spoke to before, is not only good for the carbon situation, but it also has a great business case. Now, finally, I just would like to call out to all of us to establish and strengthen the institutions that we have to enable us to be practical, because the business community today knows exactly what type of policy shifts are needed, whether it's simplified ESG reporting, faster permitting processes, improvement of electricity grids, and so forth. Most of the big multinationals don't speak to the need of financing support. They speak about policy shifts and a dialogue that we haven't been able to establish yet. Every fraction of a degree will matter. Every year we can save by collaborating together will matter, and every leader that can join the train will matter. With these words, I hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jesper. That was amazing, really inspiring, and thank you so much for being here. And it's a very busy schedule, and you had to leave right away.
Thank you.
Of all the things that you said, one thing that resonated, especially when you said it's not about party politics, it's existential and it's smart business, and that's absolutely the message we need at this particular point in time. So thank you so much. So we'll move straight on. So our next speaker is Rafael Mateo Alcala, who's the CEO of the Acciona Group, a global group working on sustainable infrastructure and specialism in renewable energy, and whose slogan is business as unusual. So Rafael, please, 7 minutes to tell us what business as unusual is about.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for the invitation of being part of this panel, the table. Let me start saying that the target is not the transition. The target is the decarbonization. The transition is just the journey. So the transition is not about producing renewables. The transition is about consuming renewables. So we need to change the mind in order to move the idea to the demand side, because all the plans that we have in all the countries, all the regulators, all the governments are talking about volume of capacity in the side of the generation. That's okay, but that we need is volume of demand in the side of the consumptions. So the consumers are key to decarbonize the economy. Let me talk about the old trilemma. We were during the last 15 years discussing about the trilemma, how to combine the affordability, the security, or the sustainability of the energy. The old energy trilemma. The solution is very clear. Renewables is the only solution. No way, because it's affordable, it's secure, it's clean, but this is the past. Today we are in phase of a new trilemma, a real trilemma, more landed, that is that we need to combine generation, demand, and transmission. This is a 3 legs table, and we need to take care about the 3 legs at the same time. If one of the legs is growing without considering the rest of the legs of the table, the table is not working as we need. We are facing some markets with excess of generation capacity in renewables, but with the impossibility of bringing the capacity to the demand because lack of transmission, or some markets with excess of demand, but not enough transmission or not enough generation. So it's very difficult to plan. I realize that it's very difficult because generation is private, demand is private, transmission is regulated, and the schedule to build capacity, to build lines or to build demand is not the same. So very difficult to resolve. But we need to be careful about planning and about talking in the 3 languages at the same time. Electricity generation is almost done. So all the electricity, we are investing a lot in renewables, we are phasing out fossil, we are phasing out coal in many countries, but this is not enough, that we need to push the rest of the consumers, that they are not in the electricity side. Electricity is just 3% of the total emissions. So we need to push more and more and more in the rest of the sectors. That we need is regulation. We need regulation with no volatility, regulation with support, as we did in the past when the regulators were supporting the PPAs in between the corporate off-takers and between the renewable producers. Let me say that we signed our first PPA in Mexico, just based in renewables 20 years ago in Mexico. So we need to push in the side of stable regulation. This is a map. Today, all the countries in the world are supporting private relation in between producers and consumers in order to have long-term PPAs. So this is the key for the future. Let me say it in the next slide. We are going to see what's happening in the future. This is a map where our company is investing in 20 countries at the same time. We are operating 15 gigawatts, just pure clean electricity. All the different technologies, solar, wind, hydro, biomass, storage. But we are very confused about where to direct the investment in the future. But the conclusion is very clear. In the markets where the demand is growing, in the markets with low penetration of the renewables. If the demand is not growing, we are not doing nothing. We are overcapacity. The supply side, we are oversupplying, but the electricity is never going to the demand because the demand is not growing. We are suffering some new risk in the business of the renewables. There were no risks 5 years ago, but today a couple of new risks are appearing for the investors. Curtailment and price cannibalization. Let me explain about curtailment is physical or economical curtailments because lack of transmission, capacity of generation that can't serve the demand because there is not physical capacity of transmission. This is a drama, this is a crime because we are investing in generation for nothing, or economical curtailments because excess of solar, lack of wind, so very low prices in the solar hours, and we are not selling the electricity in the solar hours because price is zero or even negative price, but the price when the energy is necessary at night, in winter, is still very high price. So we need to plan a best combination in between the different technologies, solar and wind. Let me say that solar product in some hours is nothing because nobody is paying for the product. So it's crazy that we are installing 4-5 times in the world more solar than wind, decreasing the prices at the solar hours, but still maintaining a very high prices of the energy when the energy is really necessary. So we have to plan better the 3 legs of the table in order to maintain the capability. Let me say in the next slide, so our company Acciona is started as a utility, just producing, but produce electricity is not enough. We need to consume electricity, and we need to facilitate to the consumers, to the customers, the services that they need. So to produce any kind of clean electricity is not enough. We need to offer to them services, efficiency, decarbonization, solutions, green, hydrogen, green. There is no more color for the hydrogen than green, or any kind of holistic view about the services that they need. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rafael. That was fascinating and really interesting to hear how you laid out this new trilemma and the important role of regulation to get through that. So thank you so much, and delivering so much in such a short time. Very impressive. So straight on then to our third keynote speaker, who is then from a government perspective and from Brazil. So we have Lais de Souza Garcia, who is head of the Renewable Energy Division at the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and therefore responsible for Brazil's renewable energy cooperation portfolio. And congratulations to you and the whole government for getting the NDC out on the table yesterday. It was very inspiring. So please, over to you.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here and to speak about energy, which is in the heart of our transition of the whole economy. And I come here today after yesterday's announcement about our NDC, and we are proud of it. We wanted to inspire ambition, but we also have a lot of work to do ourselves. And I'm so glad you brought up the trilemma issue, Rafael, because energy transitions is also about the, I want to say, sustainable development trilemma: social development, sustainability, but also economic development. And this is, as you probably know, is at the heart of Brazilian policy regarding climate, but also regarding energy. And when we are talking about energy transitions, and we say it from a point of view of a country that has 50% of the energy offer from renewables, but also almost 90% of our power sector is from renewables. So we've been doing that for a while, but we've made choices that were completely aligned with our local conditions. So we have a big stabilizer of a power system, which are hydropower dams. And this is the basis right now that we use to incorporate more and more renewables into our power system. And right now, Brazil already has an excess offer of renewable energy, and it addresses what you're saying, Rafael. We need to actually work on the demand side. We need to create a green industry. We need to foster these businesses so we can match the capacity that we have right now to generate clean energy with a growing economy. And that's why we are creating investment platforms. That's why we want our NDC to be a platform for business. But I want to bring your attention today, and I'm not going to give you any more numbers about how well Brazil is doing in the energy sector, but I want to bring a little bit of a developing country perspective for this table here today, because it's really important to set targets. Last year, we had the COP, the consensus around transitioning away from fossil fuels, to triple renewables, to double energy efficiency. But we know right now that the investment is not getting to the developing countries that need it. So we need to sixfold the investment that we need right now in developing countries, except China. And I invite you to all take a look at the roadmap that the IEA produced with the Brazilian presidency of the G20 in the context of the G20 Energy Transitions Working Group. So you can take a look at what we have to do to bring the developing countries together with us to this path to a lower carbon economy. And this is paramount because we need to be inclusive in our energy transition. And this is something that we care about in Brazil. And there will be no transition if we cannot include people. We still have around 1 billion 10% of the world population that doesn't have access to energy. We have almost 2 billion people in the world that are not using modern energy to cook. And this is a big problem. So we cannot talk about the future solutions, about the future of hydrogen and all that is really important, and investing in research and technology to provide new solutions without taking care of that part. So matching these two fronts is really, really important. And then I'm going to conclude by saying that from a developing countries perspective, we think that energy planning is at the core of the energy transition. And this is something that we need to work a little bit more in. We have our NDCs, we need to be ambitious, but we also need to have a plan for the future regarding how we want our energy mix to be, how we are going to attract investments, how we are going to create this enabling environment for investments. Big countries, small countries, rich countries, poor countries need to have a plan for the future. And this plan cannot be just about incorporating solutions that worked elsewhere. They need to incorporate local realities. They need to be in tune in what we can do. And this has to do with the bioeconomy. It has to do with using biomass, yes, as a source of energy based on science, making sure that it's sustainable. But we need to include that as well. And I give you the last number, and then with that, I will conclude. In Brazil today, energy from biomass is more important than that natural gas in our energy mix. And this was achieved because we invested in policy and because we used the resources that we had. Because when there was an oil crisis, we couldn't import fossil fuels anymore. And we had biomass there to help us get through the hard times. And today we have one of the largest biomass programs in the world that is providing energy to our country in a sustainable way. So keep your minds open. There is a lot of solutions. The IEA scenarios, the net zero scenarios also include sustainable fuels. We cannot forget about that. And without them, we won't be able to reach our goals. So thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to be here today. And I'm looking forward to the debate. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Leish, for giving that excellent overview of the Brazilian perspective, and also from developing countries more generally in terms of where the finance is going and how important therefore the finance outcome is at this COP. Also for highlighting the importance of the energy plan, that from a business perspective, we keep saying that the NDC is very important, but the translation into that stable plan and that visibility is so important. So thank you very much. And also for being concise again. We might still get through this thing on time, which is excellent. So now we move on to the roundtable part with our kind of quick fire round. Thank you again to our three speakers, or two remaining speakers. So please try and keep it to 3 minutes so we can get everybody in. And we're organizing this so we start with some government perspectives, and then we move on to some business perspectives, and then some investor perspectives, and then some NGO and civil society perspectives. So without further ado, let's turn please to Oliver Rentschler, who is the Director General for Climate Diplomacy and Geoeconomics at the Federal Foreign Office of the Government of Germany. Please, Oliver.
Thank you very much. We had one government perspective, more the development country. Now I have a heavily industrialized country perspective, Germany, and I would therefore also share our approach. I mean, I would say when it comes to governments, the number one rule is, of course, that clear, ambitious objectives and really clear phase-out commitments. Obviously, this is the number one, and stick to them and stay the course, because without that, no predictability, no clarity is what everyone needs, including, of course, the investors. And then once you have defined it, a mix of policy tools, I would say it's about using full toolbox, starting with transition planning, which needs to be clear, market design, regulation, policies, incentives, all of that comes into play. But number one, and I think it's true domestically as it's internationally, set the clear objectives and stick to them. And when it comes to that, I would give an example on the coal transition, because that's the journey on which we have already embarked earlier, and where we have already some lessons learned to share. Because we have overall, as Germany, just a quick one, a law that really prescribes climate neutrality 2045. Even 5 years ahead of the EU with its goal of net zero 2050. But for coal, again, it's in a law committing to phasing out the power sector, coal in the power sector by 2038. With that kind of clarity, you know, you have a basis for every stakeholder, so to speak. We have also made great progress already, and I think we reached that goal already much before, probably early 2030. And of course, phasing out coal is only working if you then at the same time move up on the renewables, and we come to that in a second. But what is also important is that the impact of phasing out coal for some regions in Germany where coal is really focused is such that you need to address it with a specific, with a very clear admission that in the energy transition, as we always say, it's inevitable and it is beneficial. It's a let's say, business case, but let's also be honest, it's not for each and every region, and it's not for each and every stakeholder. So you need to address that, and we have here again a legal basis. We have an investment law for the coal regions, which foresees financial contributions at the federal level, local level, to create new jobs, to invest in capacity building, in innovation, in structural changes. And this is something that I think will have to be part of any just energy transition, to look after those that are sort of not directly and not immediately benefiting from this decarbonization. And I think, again, here this is a domestic experience, which at the same time applies for the international dimension. Structural financial assistance, as said, I think is key. Then reviewing as you go along, because you can make plans as much as you want, but at one point you need to also see what works, what doesn't. We have had a first review, an independent one on our perspective and our measures, and countless co-benefits. I mean, sustainable growth in this respective region, sustainable value chains, improved health, livable cities. And I think that's also then the next lesson learned, to communicate that in a proper way and put the opportunities up front, and not so much the, let's say, we all are aware of the climate imperative, but it's also needs to be turned into something that creates that kind of perspective. And I think on that journey, we have now overall 60% renewable energies in electricity production this year, and I think that's a clear sign that it's doable under difficult circumstances. But yeah, I'm happy to share more as we go through the discussion, but in the interest of time. So
thank you so much. I know it's brutal, but thank you so much for that perspective from Germany. Move straight on to Mohamed Oumid, who is the Director of Fuels and Mining Industry at the Ministry of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development in Morocco. Over to you, please, for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much for the invitation and to this opportunity. For Morocco, despite its very low contribution to green gas emission, Morocco has already embarked on the path of decarbonization its economy. Since Marrakech Partnership, many notable progress has been made. Our ambition has been elevated with our update nationally determined contribution, which aims to reduce greenhouse emission by over 45% by 2030. Our energy transition, which we initiated in 2009, is a fundamental pillar to achieving sustainable development goals and decarbonizing our economy. Today, Morocco aims to strengthen its energy sovereignty, which is based on the large-scale development of renewable energy, for which it has significant potential, but also to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels, totally imported. To speed up the fair transition to green energy, Morocco has decided to increase the share of renewable energies in installed electricity capacity to exceed 52% by 2030. Now we are working to quadruple annual investment in renewable energy and increase investment in grid fivefold, including pump storage and battery. In fact, a green plan concerning an additional electricity capacity of 10 gigawatt between 2023 and 2027, with an investment of around $10 billion, strengthening the electrical grid by multiplying investment in the network by 5 to support the massive development of renewable energies, enhancing storage system by programming pumped energy conversion station 350 megawatt and battery storage system by 2030. Indeed, at the 26th conference on climate change, Morocco was one of the first countries to sign up to the goal declaration for no new coal energy, pledging to help the construction of new coal-fired power generation projects as an important step towards combating climate change and meeting the objective of the Paris Agreement. To success and encourage transition to green fuel, in my opinion, we must develop win-win partnership to guarantee an immediate social impact on local population. We must also increase funding level for green energy and develop research, development and innovation and local industrial integration in high social impact of the project. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Really excellent intervention and right to time, so thank you. Moving straight on to Sam Lowe, who actually has an amazing job title, which is Head of the Renewable Superpower Strategy Branch in the Department of Climate Change, Energy and Environment in Australia. So Sam, over to you, please.
Thanks, Andrew. And I didn't pick the name, but it's good to work there. Pleasure to be with you all here today. Did you want to start by sort of echoing the remarks of sort of previous speakers? I think particularly on sort of the optimism and the need to focus on sort of pragmatism around practical action. I think from a government perspective, it's critical that we set clear targets and policy environments to unlock the private investment needed. The global stocktake sets out clear next steps to keep 1.5 degrees within reach, including that all countries should bring forward ambitious economy-wide NDCs that cover all gases and sectors. And of course, all countries have a role to play in making those objectives a reality. And I think, and it's sort of touched on, I think particularly by Brazil, I think when we think about emissions reduction, there's also a real clear linkage between climate policy and economic policy and the role of emissions reduction, net zero transformation, and unlocking economic opportunity. And I think obviously governments have a very key role to play there in terms of setting those private investment signals. So in Australia, we've legislated our 2030 and 2050 emissions reduction targets to provide that certainty to industry. And as part of our net zero sectoral plan, also developing a series of net zero plan. Underneath that, 6 sectoral plans to provide that greater certainty and clarity to specific and important industries to our economy. I did just want to touch on some of the sort of discussion around opportunity, and I think sort of recognizing the different levels in which that can occur. So in Australia, we actually just recently hit the milestone of 1 in 3 households now having rooftop solar. That's obviously come on the back of a range of policy supports at a range of different levels of government. But I think importantly, it's come on the back of households recognising the economic benefits of investing in rooftop solar. I think with an estimated sort of household saving $1,500 in Australian, each year from having that on their roof, and it's a tremendous benefit to them and also sort of to the broader system. Beyond that, Australia is very much thinking about its policies as part of the global net zero transformation. In the most recent federal budget, we invested $22.7 billion over a decade in a range of priority new industries. So renewable hydrogen, critical minerals sort of being two of the larger investments, and particularly clean energy innovation. Really thinking about how we can position ourselves to support, not just our own decarbonisation, but that of our trading partners as well. We're currently legislating the act that sort of sits over the top of that, and a really important part of that act is legislating a number of community benefit principles, which will govern, some of those investments and make sure that they're delivering local benefit to communities and taking them on the journey, which of course is one of the core objectives of the investment. I think I'll stop there, but very keen to be with you all today.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sam. And thank you to our government speakers. That concludes the government section, and we'll move right on and into the business side of things. And counting on you, business speakers, your reputation for being efficient. So we'll see the nice quick fire round. So starting with Madalena Caio Lucas, who is the head of climate and global partnerships at EDP, a global power company based in Portugal. Madalena, please.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me to participating in this super interesting roundtable. So EDP started in Portugal, but it's now operating across the globe in 4 regional hubs. So we're in Europe, North America, South America, and APAC, Asia Pacific region. And we grew in the last 2 decades from having 20% of our energy generated from renewables to 97% this year. And we have ambitious, very aligned with the climate and energy goals, which are to become all green by 2030 and net zero by 2040, including our supply chain, an SBTi validated target, and backed by a climate transition plan that we now take every year to our shareholders. I would like to state one thing is that we've been hearing a lot about the COP and Baku mission, and the urgency of this mission this year, it cannot be overstated. We are going, as it was mentioned in the beginning, projections point to a 2.7, and this COP, while being the finance COP, is the one that is setting the ground for ambitious and investable NDCs so that we can secure the 1.5. Focusing on energy, and a lot has been said by CEO of Acciona, with which I totally agree. But it's now clear that we need to move on from a fossil fuel powered economy into an electrified one that's based on renewables with increasing energy efficiency solutions, and that provides clean energy solutions to those that don't have it at the moment. And the demand is critical, not only the generation, but the demand. In any case, I'll focus on the generation because that's where we stand at COP28. And although we made great progress and remarkable progress into the renewables addition capacity, the fact is that at this point, we're falling short into achieving the tripling renewable goal agreed last year. So we need to accelerate, that is clear. We need to accelerate in investments in mature technologies. We need to accelerate in networks, grids, flexible technologies like energy storage, and so on. I would point out 3 main challenges that we have, and then I move on to the main policy ask that we would be supporting. So 2024 has been a very challenging year to the energy sector, mostly due to high capital costs, and that jeopardizes the pace of investment. Second one is, of course, escalating geopolitical conflicts and competition-related measures, which are bringing, on top of the huge humanitarian consequences, uncertainty to markets. Then the last one, and the topic of discussion today, is directly linked to the policy and regulatory frameworks. So there still needs to be a lot of work to be done in terms of providing the stable investment and regulatory frameworks that will increase the predictability and volatility and reduce volatility so that we can have the encouragement to invest in these kind of clean renewable energy networks and storage technologies. So moving on to the policy ask, this is the moment where we are building the ambitious and investables NDCs 3.0. So this COP must secure and boost market confidence and unlock financing. And for that, I conclude by saying that these NDCs should at least cover all sectors, main emitting ones. They should include national targets for renewable energy and timelines for phasing out coal. And they should be backed by consistent public policies that ensure that they're investable. Namely, when we speak about the permitting, which we all have been speaking about, not only simplifying the bureaucratic processes, but also reinforcing public decision bodies to accelerate the permitting. And last, involve in a transparent manner the private sector, the business and stakeholders throughout the building up of the NDCs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madalena. We'll move straight on to Agnieszka Gajewska from the Global Government and Public Sector Leader from PwC. Over to you, Agnieszka, please.
Thank you so much. And it's really great to be part of such a fantastic roundtable. Listen, we are a professional services company with more than 400,000 people around the world working with our clients on their decarbonization journey. So I would much rather refer to our clients' journey than our journey as such, although I will cover this as well. You asked two, I think, very important questions. The first one is what we see as the specific policy measures that needs to be adopted. And I would say maybe the first thing would be we need to have specific policies, yes? Because as NDCs, I see as a place on the map. I see the policies as the detailed road how to get there, and we need it. It's an obvious thing. So policies need to be specific, and I very much aligned with what Madalena just said about stability of regulatory standards. We need them. So we need to be able to take our businesses, our societies from pledges to policies, and we need this regulation stability and predictability of what is in front of us. The regulations need to be nimble because clearly technologies are there, financing up, coming and going. We need to be able to be nimble here, but we need to have this predictability. And the last point about this regulatory standards is it's not only about what, but also how. So very often when we interact with our clients, it's like about the ease of interacting with public sector, with not needing to really deal with the silos within different public sectors, and really dealing with the governance. So this is the first policy measure. The second one that is very close, I think, to our heart is also supporting research and development and scaling up technologies. If we are really serious about getting to where we want to get, we need to be much better in how we define subsidies, how we identify and keep the incentives. And given how important and also how promising different technologies is, but also how risky they is. It is a very serious question to ask, should the government and to which extent public sector should also be a part of investment cycle and the risking cycle. The third thing about specific policies, in my opinion, is leveraging private sector finance. We've been talking about it here. I've been in different panels. It is quite obvious thing that if we want to get where public sector needs to play a role in supporting the collaboration, facilitating this ecosystem that we need. And for this, we clearly need also stable environment. It is about the risking and managing risk of public sector. And also that, because we're talking about just transition here as well as clearly having the point of view and support of affordability if it is needed. So this is about how we see the policies and specific policy measures. Now about the challenges, and I think it is an excellent question. As PwC, we are probably not most representative for our clients. We are service companies, so clearly we not emit that much. We're not producing anything, but clearly we also have our carbon footprint, mainly for our buildings and from our travel. Clearly, we also have our ambitions and we are very serious about them. But I think much more interesting is to bring perspective of our clients. And I think if I'm talking and discussing with them their transition journey, the three most important challenges that I see is, first of all, inconsistent public sector approach to climate ambitions. It's not only about the regulations as such, because I think they can change. But I think what is quite important is there is still not always enough clarity of this decarbonization pathway. So, policies and regulations and incentives, they are an ecosystem and they need to be clear and consistent. The second obvious one is financial. Yeah. And I think this one is quite sector specific and country specific. We need to take it into account. And this is, again, what Madalena was referring to, access to finance, but also cost of finance, which is very much important. And also very high, very often high upfront cost, but very often are not justifying the business case. And the last point that is very much aligned with what I said here is about measures that are needed is technologies. We believe that technology, on the one hand, it should be in theory something that should democratize energy transition, but it is not always the case. Yes, technology in theory should make it quicker, more just and more accessible. It's not always the case. So we are seeing our clients sometimes having big challenges in access and ability to adopt technologies, risk appetite. As I said, some technologies are very promising, but still very much untested, and financial capacities. So I think these are the three areas that I believe are probably most relevant to our clients, how we see their journey.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you to both business speakers so far for being very specific on these questions around the policy measures needed and the challenges, which I should have highlighted at the beginning. So thank you for that. Move straight on then to Ankit Todi, who is the Group Chief Sustainability Officer from the Mahindra Group in India. Ankit, please.
Thank you, Andrew, for having me here. I would like to cover three very specific points. So when it comes to climate transition, it is all about the energy transition. It can be broken down into three very specific elements. The first is the entire renewable energy transition. The second is energy efficiency, and the third is electrification. When it comes to the NDC targets for each of the countries around the world, how can we ensure that we have very specific metrics to track all 3 points, and not just the end goal, but also year-on-year metrics? So that's one that itself will really help accelerate the conversations, the policy, and we'll know how to review performance and compare them. That's one. The second thing that I would like to add is specifically when it comes to renewable energy, a number that is often talked about when it comes to the NDCs and number that is much more common is installed capacity. The thing to realize is that 1 gigawatt of coal is not equal to 1 gigawatt of renewable energy. Those metrics are not comparable. So how do we move to making sure that we are tracking the right metric, which is percentage of renewable electricity generation, and also more importantly, renewable energy use? The distinction between energy and electricity is also critical, and also to make sure that we are not tracking generation capacity, but rather actual generation. So how do we move the narrative to the right metrics? That's the second point that I would really stress upon. The third thing that I would like to add is representing Mahindra Group, which is a large organization in India. We are present in 20 different sectors, both a large consumer of electricity, but also a large supplier of electricity. When it comes to challenges specifically with respect to renewable energy, I think the technology is there, the financing is there, because it already makes a lot of business sense. The reason why we are not still moving fast enough is that the process of approvals, etc., is still slow. So for every 20 to 25 gigawatt of renewable energy that's being deployed in India every year, there's almost 2 to 3 times as much projects in the jumbo in approval stages. So how do we really accelerate that flow from conceptualization to commissioning, cut down the time, because it also helps save money, and then it'll just get the cycle going faster. And lastly, as a responsible, while we sort of solve the climate transition, it's very important to also take into account responsible renewable energy procurement. There are about 8 or 10 factors that go into it with respect to how you procure land, the end of life recycling of the panels. There are about 10 different issues, use of water while maintaining the plants. If I'm taking just solar as an example, there are about 8 or 10 different major issues that go into ensuring that these projects, while they solve for energy transition, but it's also a just transition, the skilling associated with it. So as conscious consumers, both in the corporate ecosystem, but more widely around the world, how do we make sure that we have these standard guidelines in all projects that are being built out, solve for these right on day one? So I'll pause with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really interesting and being so specific. We'll move straight on then to Basim Abdulrahman, who is the CEO of KESK, if I'm pronouncing it right, which is a green power company in Iraq. Basim, please.
Thank you so much. KESK is a green energy company. We define ourselves as a green energy ecosystem platform. We provide renewable energy engineering services, EPC basically for delivering solar PV projects. And we also have developed in-house software solution for control and monitoring, real-time monitoring and control of renewable energy assets. And I think this addresses one of the points you were mentioning in terms of generation versus consumption. We have insights and information on all these data for our clients. I want to focus on challenges and policy recommendations related to the regional focus where we operate at. We are based and we're operating in Iraq. The main an overview about the power generation supply versus demand in Iraq. Supply of electricity through the national grid is scarce. The availability of electricity coming from the grid is, in best case scenario, 12 hours a day. There is a huge gap in power supply versus demand. It's been this way for decades. The alternative to fill the gap is by using private diesel generators. We have over 50,000 diesel generators, large-size diesel generators scattered across the country, and they can cover only 10% of the gap in terms of power supply today. They're highly polluting, but very expensive, and also the generation and supply through the national grid. It's been a challenge for many decades, and the situation getting worse every year. It's not improving. There is an issue with the infrastructure, with the capacity of the production, etc. So this is a huge opportunity to fill this gap in terms of electricity supply through renewable energy solutions. Because whatever we have in terms of power supply is coming from fossil fuel-based energy. However, the main challenge that I want to focus on today, which I think it should be a priority when it comes to this discussion, is subsidies for a fossil fuel-based energy production. I'm an owner and a founder and a CEO of a renewable energy company in Iraq. I'm operating in a region where the government subsidizes the power from the grid over 90%. So the electricity is almost for free. In order to recommend renewable energy solutions for our clients, from businesses, from other sectors, is almost impossible to justify return on investment if we look at the national grid tariffs. So the only policy recommendation I would think of at this point is we need strict regulations to phase out fossil fuel subsidies. These subsidies need to start transitioning toward renewable energy solutions, renewable energy power generation. This is the point that we need to start at, and everything else in terms of investment, financing will start come together once we get to this sorted.
Thank you so much, and thank you for raising the fossil fuel subsidy issue, which is particularly striking in Iraq, but a problem pretty much everywhere. So thank you so much for that. Right, now to turn my head over this way to move to Fernanda Facchini, who is head of climate change and circular economy at Natura and company based in Brazil. And we're going to get kicked out of the room, so I'm going to start setting a timer 3 minutes, and it's very brutal, but sorry for that.
Okay. Thank you for having me here today. Natura is a Brazilian cosmetic company that is using renewable ingredients in our formulations, and we are operating basically in the Latin America countries. So for us, the challenges are related to the subsidies, as the colleagues commented, related to incentivize the renewable energy to our value chain, especially for us. The scope 3 emissions are the most challenges that we have in our industry, and we need to incentivize our suppliers to use renewable energy in their process, because for our own operations, we already did the lessons. We reduce more than 30% of our emissions in our own operations, and we are committed to achieve net zero until 2030. But we have a lot of challenges related to our suppliers, especially talking about packaging and chemicals. So we are using a lot of biodiverse ingredients from the Amazon region. So we have a lot of challenges related to renewable energy for these local communities and for these families that are living there, because we need to talk about people, as my colleague from Brazil talked, because we are living in a region that we are facing a lot of challenges related to inequalities. So we need to give access of energy for these families to start the conversation. And after, we need to move to renewable energy. So we have to work with the governors to ability these challenges. And to talk more about the NDC challenge for Brazil, we are not facing some challenge to reduce fossil fuels, but our challenge is related to deforestation. So as a private sector company that are using biodiversity, our commitment is to extending the forest. So we are buying a lot of ingredients from the region, trying to conserve the standing forest, but we need to scale up bioeconomy because we have a huge potential, but we are using less than 4% of the potential that we have in the region. So we have a lot of challenge, and we need to incentivize and to show the world how important it is to invest in this kind of technology and to generate revenues for the families that are living in that region. And I think that it's important for us to have our carbon market regulated in Brazil, because we are now talking a lot about Article 6 here. And I think it will be a huge advance for us as a region that we have this advocating for this kind of policy change. And I think the most important challenge talking about the supply chain is to talk about deforestation-free supply chains, because for Brazil, the land use is a very important topic, and we need to work with the CPG and the big companies to talk about the challenge that we are facing in the agriculture in the world, because this is a food security topic, and I think it's important to have this discussion here too.
So much bringing the Natura's perspective and across the packaging, chemicals, and the bioeconomy. Very, very interesting. That horrible noise was the timer, by the way. So moving on now to more of the investor perspective, 3 investor perspectives, starting with Nathalie Signa, who's head of sustainability at UBS Asset Management. So Nathalie, please.
Okay, hi everyone. So I work at UBS Asset Management, which has approximately 5 trillion assets under management. I sit in the real estate and private markets business, doing direct infrastructure investing. And we see a variety of different challenges in terms of the specific policy measures that we have that we would see as helpful. fossil fuel subsidies is very important for us. The reality is that fossil fuels are still very profitable, and traditional renewables, wind and solar, the returns are much lower than in the past. And we also want to see pragmatic policies. So permitting is a huge problem. The grid queue is years long in some places of the world. And pragmatic policies on these types of issues would have a significant impact in speeding up renewable energy into the grid. Battery energy storage we see as critical for grid stability. Batteries charge when there is excess renewables on the grid, and they discharge when there's fossil fuel generation on the grid. In addition, hard-to-abate sectors, including transport, agriculture, buildings, contribute to over 50% of greenhouse gas emissions globally. And transport is about 25% of global CO2 emissions, but is often left out of the conversation. So I wanted to bring that today. And transport needs between 5 to 8 times the capital that renewables needs to meet our net zero targets. But there's still a 3 trillion investment gap every year between now and 2050 to meet our net zero goals. We also need the investment fundamentals to make sense with a supportive policy environment, but also space for innovation. And we'd like to see clear and consistent but balanced regulation of the right type to support inflows to the transition to net zero.
Thank you. It came in before the bell. So it's now going to go off just right now. Thank you so much. And yeah, bringing the transport side and things, the size of the investment needed, so important considering energy at large. So thank you for that. Move on to Jan Kahira Rasmussen, who is head of ESG and sustainability from Pension Denmark. Jan.
Thank you very much. So many interesting topics to talk about here today, but I will focus on how we think about financing the development of renewable energy in what we could call the Global South. Last year at the COP in Dubai, we were anchor investors in a dedicated fund vehicle that should finance the development of renewable energy in what we would call high growth new markets. It was met with great curiosity from other investors, but many investors are still hesitant to finance the development through equity of renewable energy in the emerging markets. So far, we have good experiences with what we have done through other vehicles. We have been involved in the development of solar parks and onshore wind in India. We have been financing development of 6 minor solar parks in South Africa, to mention a few, and much more in the pipeline. So what do we need to convince our fellow investors in the northern, in the most rich part of the world to come with us to make these investments? You must know that if we make equity investments, you can gear them 5 times. So it's really a huge impact you have when you finance with equity. What we see as a main obstacle and barrier for us when we have to showcase what we already have in our pipeline and what our track record is, and I echo fully what has been said by others, that permitting time is really a problem. We have to put a lot of money on the table, and we expect a revenue stream to come within some years. And if that's too many years, we won't put any money on the table, and we will not be able to convince any of our colleagues in the finance sector that they should do it. Then we have the other part of what I would call the EMDCs, or the Global South, that is the least developed countries. Here we need blended finance, and I think that's also one of the main points at this COP, how to construct blended finance vehicles in a reasonable way to mobilize private capital. We have had very good roundtables with IFCs, MDBs, through IGCC, among others. And I think that we have had some good operated talks. We are talking about hedging, currency risk, how we could have guarantees and first loss structures. So I hope that that will be a team that continues on this COP. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Right on the buzzer. Thanks for bringing that perspective of challenges in global south developing countries. Really interesting. And moving on now to our third investor perspective from Hugh Garnett, who is Senior Program Manager at the Institutional Investors Group on Climate Change, IIGCC.
Thank you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. So at IIGCC, we work with more than 400 institutional investors, including Pension Denmark and UBS Asset Management, to address climate risk and ensure they are well positioned to make the most of investment opportunities offered by climate mitigation and adaptation efforts, ensuring that their investments contribute towards a better world for us all to live in. So our net zero investment framework, which is the most widely used guide for investors to set targets and develop net zero strategies and transition plans, recommends that investors set a quantitative target for scaling up investments in climate solutions. This is on the basis that the transition to net zero is in line with credible scientific pathways, not only requires a phase down of emissions intensive activities, but also acceleration of low carbon alternatives, which we've heard quite a lot today. Last week, IIGCC published Investing in Climate Solutions, Renewable Energy Generation, establishing guidance for investors to consider their approach to quantifying their contribution to scaling renewable energy generation within the infrastructure asset class. Developed by our investor members, it was designed to be consistent with the global goal established at COP28 to triple renewable installed capacity by 2030. It sets out how investors can calculate their contributions and attributions to tripling renewables. Focuses on primary markets, cumulative, and provides the advice on the cumulative total finance installed capacity, and also provides guidance in secondary markets for annual finance installed capacity. While the focus is certainly on those primary finance, secondary markets also play a really important role here. Whilst not providing new capital, they play an important role to be part of the wider ecosystem that supports primary finance and stewards of these assets once they become operational. Over the next year, we'll be working closely with our asset owner and asset manager members to look to set clear signals on the investments that they will make into renewable energy generation in the run up to 2030. But there are clearly a number of barriers that we've heard about today, so I'm not going to go over those. But I think there's one key message that we would like to take away and send to governments in developing their NDCs to address these barriers and ensure that we transition away from fossil fuel and drive investment, is that we need a whole of government and industry approach. We call on governments to not develop their NDCs in isolation within their climate departments, but develop them across government and engage with the private sector. In particular, governments need to undertake clear national planning to upgrade transmission, distribution, and storage networks to be ready for the influx of renewables that is coming. This clear national planning will send signals and give investors the confidence to bring in more private capital to invest in both grid upgrades as well as renewable generation, and will result in the scaling up of investment in renewables that is needed to reach our goals.
Thank you so much, Hugh. And now we'll move on to our last group of speakers who we loosely grouped as kind of associations and NGO perspective, but starting with Gaston Suart, who is the Senior Advisor to the Executive Secretary of OLADE, which is the Latin American Energy Association. So Gaston, please.
Hello, thank you. Thanks, Andrew, for the invitation. So I would like to share with you some facts and some political decisions that my region, Latin America and the Caribbean, has. So first of all, a very short presentation of OLADE. OLADE is an intergovernmental organization that has 27 countries, going from Mexico to Chile and passing through Central America and the Caribbean. So our region is what we call the greener region in the world. We have our energy matrix with 30% of renewable energy. And when we talk about the electricity, we are over 65% of renewable energy. So this is a fact, this is where we are. So every year within the organization, the ministers of energy get together and take decision that will mark the year after. So this year, there are 3 political decisions that I would like to share with you. The first one is a declaration signed by 20 countries in the region that says that those 20 countries will not initiate any new coal-fired power plant. So I believe it's a strong message that our region wants to share with the rest of the organization of the world, because we believe that even if we have the doubling and the tripling pledge, we have to start moving into actions and into local or regional decisions. So this is the first decision I would like to share with you. The second one is regarding doubling our rate of energy efficiency. In our case, the work we've done during the last month was to translate this doubling into figures, into numbers for our region. So we've set a goal, a target. So what's the target? We are going to achieve 1.3% by 2030. So it means that from where we are going to achieve this number by 2030. And I believe that it's important when you start having these figures and you turn them into regional targets, it will help countries to double their engagement. It's not only a worldwide engagement, now we have a regional engagement. And the third decision that was taken by the ministers was the creation of a regional energy planning council. We are suffering climate change impact. Now, this year in 2024, we had 5 countries with shortage or with lack of power in our region. It's huge. Even if we have a greener matrix, we suffer the climate change. So this decision in working on an agenda that help us on the energy planning at a regional level will help us with this energy trilemma. We'll have the possibility of have a better planning and an integrated planning in order to share electricity, to share the energy integration that will help us to have energy access increase, reduce the emission, and to have affordable prices by having always the cheaper energy. So I believe that it was a good opportunity to share this fact and this decision with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gaston. Thanks for bringing in the energy efficiency element. It's so important, and the importance of the Regional Planning Council. So moving on to Johan Falk, who's CEO of the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, great partners of ours that we mean business. So Johan, please.
Thank you, and great to be here. I represent the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, and we have a common mission to halve emissions by 2030 through exponential climate action and solutions. And we bring together some of the leading transformative and disruptive companies in the world, companies like IKEA, Apple, Scania, and Google, and so on, with the same mission. And all are, of course, working to cut emissions through the value chains. About 2/3 are on track, which I think is a good sign, show that it is achievable if you go in the front line. A key tool, of course, which is incredibly important, is that we moved from just target setting to transition plans, true transition plans. And we work intensively with the high number of companies to support them in developing transition plans and moving them into action. And transition plans, from our perspective, should cover across 4 pillars. It's about cutting your own emissions in alignment with science, about halving emissions by 2030. But it's also, of course, the complete value chain. Is both the energy transformation, but also the material transformation. The material transformation has to be done in parallel, not sequentially. And it's, of course, about fossil phase out, stopping deforestation. What companies realize is, of course, that they can't achieve net zero on their own. You have to do that together with your value chain, both upstream and downstream. I see 2 types of transition plans. One could be what we call a tick in a box. It's something you have to do from a regulatory perspective. But to be successful, you really need to integrate your transition plan as part of your business strategy, because this is basically the only way to achieve growth over time. And apart from just looking at the cutting of emissions, we see it's really essential for companies to actually also working on transforming their portfolio, the up curves, how they scale up climate solutions, but also how they contribute to the climate action in society, such as policy influencing. And that takes me to the linking to the national, to the NDCs and the national transition plans. So I think we can see the same pattern here. We're moving from setting targets on a national level, but the key point will have to be to have national transition plans and over time integrate them in the financial plans, not as a side activity. And it needs to come down per sector, energy, of course, transportation, mobility, and so on, because this is the key opportunity as far as I see it, really progressive company transition plans, which links to very progressive national transition plans integrated in the financial plans. Because when we're switching the complete economy, 90% of the economy is committed through net zero targets. Actors need to decide if they should come out as winners or losers. So we think we should move from sharing our burdens to a more positive race to the top. I think that is key opportunity.
Move on. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, Johan, but thanks so much for bringing transition plans. I think it's the first time it's been mentioned. That was great. And then moving on to our last speaker is Benjamin Streletsky, who is an advisor with the Global Renewables Alliance. Benjamin, please.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and thanks everyone for having me and having the Global Renewables Alliance at the table. Before I respond to the questions, just I'd like to commend the Olade decision to stop the construction of new coal power plants, because in addition to rapidly scaling up renewables, it is critical to also stop construction of new fossil fuel power plants and eventually work to decommission the existing assets. So in terms of the new nationally determined contributions, we as the GRA have been very clear on what is needed from the private renewable energy sector. And that is for the new NDCs to include ambitious, specific, and actionable renewable energy targets. And what that means is that the new targets needs to be aligned with the 1.5C pathways on a national level, that they are quantifiable and for 2030 and 2035, and that they are underpinned by robust energy resource and investment plans and enabling policy reforms that provide certainty. Because certainty is what industry, including developers, technology manufacturers, and utilities need in order to make their plans and commit their capital to the next 10, 15-year cycle for expansion of their activities. Those new climate plans are an opportunity in particular for developing countries to showcase how the clean transformation of their economies is attractive for international investors. And there has been a lot of talk about it here in Baku in the context of the new goal on finance. And we hope that then an ambitious outcome on the NCQG will encourage countries to put forward ambitious NDCs before the February deadline next year. In terms of the challenges that we are facing for transitioning away from fossil fuels to clean energy solutions, the GRA has been championing 4 pillars of our Time for Action campaign. In case you haven't heard about it, these include finance, a $10 trillion cumulative investment in renewable energy by 2030, supply chains, permitting, and grids. Here, I would like to focus on 2 aspects that are relevant to the work that the COP29 Azerbaijan presidency has been doing. Some of you may have heard that earlier today there was a ministerial that supported grids on that supported targets on grids and storage, which are both critical to meeting the tripling renewables target. In terms of storage, we need a 6-fold increase to 1,500 gigawatts of capacity by 2030 to ensure that we can effectively integrate renewables. And that includes not only batteries, but also long duration energy storage. In terms of grids, we need to refurbish 25 million kilometers of grids by 2030. And that's roughly 50% more than what we've been doing until now. With that, I would like to also highlight the need for finance. The GRI estimate is that we need $6.2 trillion of dollars of debt and $2.3 trillion of equity, bringing us to the total of 10 trillions. Looking forward to working with all of you in the coming years on this agenda. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. Thank you, everybody, for that. Was a really fascinating discussion. So many interesting inputs. And the good news for me is that I don't have to summarize it because Elliot is here to do a very quick closing remarks and summary. So Elliot is the Executive Director and Chief System Change Officer at the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership, also a board member of our organization. So good luck.
Thank you, Andrew. And yeah, thank you. No small task. I will try and be brief and to the point. First, let me recognize what an enormously important and useful conversation that was. I think that the whole of the Marrakech Partnership is set up to support and enable these kind of dialogues where we have the role of non-state actors contributing to the transition that's necessary. And I think that we've demonstrated that again today. It's something that at CISL, the work that we do and across our corporate leaders groups and across the Women Business Coalition, we've recognized in terms like the ambition, the importance of seeing synergies between action in the private sector and action in the public sector. And so these kind of conversations are really, really important. I picked out a few themes from the conversation that I just wanted to comment on very, very briefly and just talk about them because I think it helps us draw some lessons in terms of how we build on this dialogue and how we build on this conversation. So one very much was the theme of stability and certainty. I think if anybody came into this room thinking anything other than business wants much more clarity and certainty to enable to invest, then they surely know that now. But I actually think that the governments in this room, when I listened to them, every government spoke about plans, laws, commitments. So I feel like that message is heard. But I think that in all the individual contributions, there has been quite a lot of detail about how to drill down into the specifics and how important it is to ensure that clarity in terms of direction of travel is reflected in treaty language, in NDCs, is reflected in legal instruments that help create that certainty and help create that momentum. Second theme I heard was a lot of discussion about communities, about inclusion, about justice. And relatedly, the really important conversation around permitting and being able to move forward. And I say relatedly because it feels to me that there is a clearly identified thread to this conversation, which is that in order to build out this level of infrastructure, this level of action, we need to get better at substantively taking on board the concerns of communities, helping them be listened to, feel listened to, and moving to decisions quickly, rather than so we get to the yeses and the nos more quickly than we are currently, which doesn't mean not listening to communities, but it doesn't also mean spending 10 years trying to discuss it with them. So it's a really important thing there. And I think there was some, I noted particularly from the governments there were, and also from many of the businesses, there was particular recommendations about how to maximize that inclusion. Third theme I think was really important is finance and access to finance, and the particular challenge there in terms of getting finance into emerging markets, and particularly the least developed countries, and the valuable contributions from the finance sector, from the investors and others about the ways that we're going to need to see more public-private collaboration in order to get those finance flows going. So I think that's really key. And then lastly, a really important conversation about how we need to move forward and implement it. And I heard the value of incentives talked about and a lot of contributions and a lot of comments. We need to work on shifting the overall structure of markets so that this level of activity is scaled up, so that we are both delivering on the overall commitments like the tripling of renewables, but also on the commitments like no new coal, and moving us forward into that space. And if I could say one last thing, it's that people around this table, I think, have got a lot to say for themselves and have been talking about it and represent a significant body of leadership. We need to get better at projecting that leadership and bringing more people along with us and having more people fighting to be around this table telling such excellent stories in the future.
Great. Thank you so much, Elliot. Masterful summary in such a short time. Excellent. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you to the GCA team and the High Level Champions team, and apologies that we went a few minutes over, but it was a fascinating discussion. Thank you all.